Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Joi R.Fisher-Griffin. Did I get the whole name right?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
You're welcome. She's a notable entrepreneur and author who has extensive background in education and is fervently involved as an advocate for families and belonging. As an adoptee herself, she has overcome numerous challenges and chronicled her experience in her memoir titled Finding Joy, a True Story of Faith, Family, and Love. Joi, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, listen, it's definitely my pleasure. So, Joi, tell us your journey. What was it like, growing up? You become an entrepreneur. Now you're an author. You wrote the book, Finding Joy, a True Story of Faith, Family, and Love. What was that journey like to get here to today?
Wow.
You can give us a short version if it's such a great story.
That's a loaded question. I was going to say a lot of it to get to this journey, putting all the pieces together has come from journaling and taking, I never called it a diary. I would just always write things down that were going on in my life, write down things that I saw that inspired me. If I heard somebody speak, I would write down quotes. I would write down this. And I've been doing that since high school. And it wasn't until actually going through my divorce that I realized how much I've written over the years. And then I said, when I spoke to actually my divorce lawyer and my therapist at the time, in trying to manage all the things that I was dealing with, they said, whenever you decide to write a book, I want to be the first person to read your book. And you've gone through quite a bit through your relationships and learning about your, being adopted and the things and how that impacted your relationships. And I think you need to share that with people. And my first thought was, who wants to put all their business out there like that? Not, that was the last thing I wanted to do.
Right.
But as an educator, I realized I work with young people. I deal with teenage boys and girls. And as a mother of three, I realized somebody has to start putting their stories out there for people to begin to have these conversations. Who talks about divorce? Who talks about being in toxic relationships? Who talks about, we hide, we're ashamed, we're embarrassed of all those things. And I never connected my issues or challenges with my adoption because I always thought, I knew I was adopted. I never had any problems. Oh, adoption has nothing to do with it. But it wasn't until I met other adoptees, adopted parents, and foster parents and birth parents that I realized some of my issues deal with my feeling that I don't belong anywhere, feeling that I'm unworthy, feeling that I might not be enough and that I'm unlovable, things that I never said, but I internalized. And unfortunately, back then, a lot of the media kind of led you with that impression as well. As an adoptee, you must be crazy, you must be, there's always something wrong with the adoptee and things that we used to see on the media.
Yeah.
And so I realized over time in talking with people throughout the adoption triad, that's the adopted parents, the birth parents, and other adoptees, that maybe these are some issues that I've had with adoption and my identity. And I began to see some connections and how it weaved into my relationships, which were some of them were unhealthy, and some of the choices that I made because I didn't feel that I was enough. And I would have never said, oh, Joi has low self-esteem, but Joi had low self-esteem. And so finally being honest about that and realizing that counseling helps, but counseling only helps if you go in and you're honest, and began to change my outlook in terms of what healthy relationships look like. And as my daughters were getting older and getting to the dating age, it concerned me as a parent that we always say, do what we say, not what we do.
Yeah.
But what are kids going to do? They're going to do exactly what they see. And so I began to worry that I didn't want them to go down the same path that I had gone in choosing my partners, over whether it was high school, college, or things of that nature, because of the things that I felt about myself. I wanted them to see a healthy relationship. And so that became a big part of me first rebuilding myself, because I needed to work on me before I could even get into another relationship after divorce. And so that journey began with my own healing. and navigating all the things that came up through adoption and came up in analyzing and thinking about my relationships and my choices over the years. And it's just been a big part of what's gotten me here today, to be honest. To seek and find community groups, to find support groups, to find counselors who get it. And if a counselor didn't work, to move on to the next counselor, not blame it on counseling, because that's one of the big things people say, oh, counseling doesn't work. One, were you honest? And two, sometimes it's just not a good match for you. And it's okay
Right.
to say that. And maybe you need a different counselor, and it's okay to move on and find somebody who can work with you, not who you can manipulate, but who can work with you and help talk you through some of the things that are really deeply personal. So that's been a big part of my journey and what got me here today.
Wow, that's some journey and some story, and it's funny because while you're going over your story about uh not belonging, I went through similar things with my mother. I got raised by my grandparents, and it wasn't until little later on when she told me the story. So I felt the same way, that I didn't belong, I'm not worthy, and all that, especially in my 20s and early 30s. So I
Oh yeah.
sabotaged a lot of my relationships with women. It's funny, 30, 40 years later, I look back and I'm like, damn, man, that woman was marriage material, and that one I screwed up. But again, you have to go through that journey to realize what's going on. So, and today's topic is a great one. It's about abandonment issues, leave that relationship. And so, Joy, in your journey, people that you talk to, friends, family, whoever it may be, are you finding it tougher for, or are people finding it tougher to leave a relationship because A, they don't want to be alone, and B, they figure they could try to salvage a relationship even though it's probably not savable. Did my question make any sense at all?
Absolutely. And I'm just nodding my head because it's all of that. And for me, and again, I think as you were talking, I'm thinking about what the media says and what we see on social media. So I think it was a struggle with, like you said, sabotage, but fears of abandonment. That was the
Mm,
number one for me. When I look back on my relationships over the years, I was always afraid to be alone. I always have been in a relationship, and I never wanted to be by myself, and that's
mm,
not healthy. That's not healthy. And trying to figure out, at what point do you, and it's about, I think, the safety of it all, the security of what relationships bring. And even sometimes in relationships that aren't healthy, we'll find the good in it, rather than dealing with what the real challenges are. And it finally, the tipping point for me was, is this what love really should feel like?
right.
And beginning to understand that I was worthy of more. If I'm putting my all into this relationship and this person really isn't doing what they need to do on their part, why am I staying? Is this what the rest of my life is supposed to be like? I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. And I also began to look at healthy relationships around me. When you think about it, you see a lot of broken relationships, and on social media, you see a lot of wonderful relationships. And as it appears, I say the highlight reel, and on that highlight reel is all the perfect things that are going on in their relationship. But when I began to talk to some women, and they would see some of the things or hear about what was written in my book about my relationship, they began to come clean that, just a few weeks ago, they were posting about they're so excited about their anniversary. And you realize their marriage is falling apart. But yet, if you look back on social media, it just looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I began to take a look at and talk to people, older people who were in relationships over time, and joined, in one particular case, we joined a marriage ministry and began to see some of the things that were going on in real relationships. People who have been married 35 and 40 years who still argued about the remote control. They argued about who was going to wash the clothes and who was going to fold the clothes and things of that
And
nature.
that's part of life, right?
And that is part of life, and
Yeah.
and I think having that experience made me realize that's it's okay for us to still argue about the remote control. It's not the end of the world. You gotta pick and choose your battles. So I think, realizing that it is okay to be alone, and that I would have to work on myself before I could move into another relationship, taking a look at the relationships around me, the ones that weren't successful necessarily on social media, but the ones who you could see live and in person. people who were in good relationships. You like the interaction with them. You like the interaction that they had with each other's friends. So I began to pay attention to all of those things going on around me, and also got out of the idea of having this list and
Yeah.
this list of characteristics. Oh, he needs to. I'm tall, so he needs to be tall, and he needs to be athletic, and he. No, I'm looking for someone who was kind, who was caring, who, had family at heart because that's important to me, who liked to go out and get around every now and then outdoors, who wasn't a smoker. And when I began to think about it in terms of that way, it wasn't I began to call them non-negotiables. Well, Joy, what are your
Mhm.
non-negotiables? And it's okay to have those. And sometimes some folks' lists are just ridiculous. And sometimes people have lists of characteristics that has nothing to do with character of the
Right.
person that they really want. So they'll talk about the outward appearances or the things that they must have. But what about the person? What is it about the person that you want to draw into your life or you want to have in your life?
I want to touch base on that, and we're talking with Joy Fisher-Griffin, and today's a great topic. It's leave that relationship, abandonment issues. You talking about having a list of criteria and standards is for some women it seems like they have like a 27-point checklist, and you have to check every box because if you don't, that guy is done. And
Right.
and it's mostly it what I've been hearing and reading and seeing. It's mostly they have to have a certain amount of money they make. They have to be, like you said before, they have to be tall, and they have to have status. So
Yes.
if you have a 9 to 5, that pretty much knocks you out because you don't have status. You still work, and for some of these women, they got to understand, guys. Some guys want to work a 9 to 5, and they can still do their side hustle,
Mhm.
and not to think and to think about it. When someone's working, think about the healthcare benefits they're getting. Some people rather work and get a discounted healthcare benefit from an employee
Absolutely.
than or an employer than you doing it yourself and having to pay. I'm just throwing a number where you might pay $100 a month, but if you work for an employer, you might pay $75 a month. Again, the numbers might be skewed a little bit, but I think you get the point. Is the standards that are out there for women just too high that some men can't meet? And like you said, how about the character? How about the personality? Does that come in anywhere on that list?
Yeah, I think sometimes not I don't I guess standards too high may be a good way to put it. I was trying to think of how else I might say that. But I think when people have standards like that are so in one case materialistic and in
Mm.
other cases and you hear some men who talk about relationships, they say, well, do you also bring those things to the table? So can you ask someone to have all these things and you don't even check off any of those boxes?
And I want to touch base on that. Sorry, Joy, because
Mhm.
that's a great point that you made. Um, Women are asking for them, even some men, but let's say the women are asking for it because we're looking for their affection, we're looking for their approval, we're looking for their love. But it seems like, again, reading and seeing things, some women say, "Oh yeah, I'm bringing meat to the table. I'm bringing," and I'm like, "Oh, is that enough?"
Is that
Uh,
enough, right? Yeah,
yeah,
what does that actually mean? Break it down into your own check boxes. Which check boxes of mine might you check off? But I think yes, it's fine to have I think you mentioned the word criteria and standards,
yeah,
but I think if you just go back to get some core non-negotiables. What are those non-negotiables? I didn't want someone who smoked. I
mm,
I was okay if they drank it, but not on a daily basis, but,
right.
someone who enjoyed their beer every now and then, or when we could go out, drank socially. I was looking for someone who enjoyed music and dancing. So those are things
Which is
that you
pretty
can find.
reasonable. Well, I think
Yeah,
that's pretty
yeah, they're
reasonable.
reasonable things, and if they had children, I was okay with that. But though I think those are more, as you said, reasonable things that another person could come to the table with.
Right.
But when I actually spoke to my cousin who is a matchmaker, and she said, Joy, when you fill out your profile, she said, be honest. She said, be honest when you put, and I did online dating. She said, be honest with what you put on your own profile and be honest when you're looking at somebody else's profile. If this person says they smoke and you know you don't want a smoker, it's okay to swipe left and not swipe right, or, click X, not interested, because
Right.
I had a hard time with that in the beginning. People are sending all those little messages and you're getting this, and I had no clue what to do on this online dating stuff. But they're sending you the wave or the high and whatever the little things were.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going, "Okay, I have to respond to all of these?" She said, "No." She said, "You have to look through," she said, "and read very carefully what you see." She said, "But also be honest in what if they checked off that they're interested in a relationship, and at the time you were only looking for companionship, then that might not be somebody for you. Take a
Right.
look at what you're putting on the table and what they're putting on the table and see how they mesh out for where you'd like to go in a relationship."
I don't know. I like that. It's funny because I'm such a opponent of online dating.
Oh, wow.
And that's me because because of catfishing
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and ghosting, things like that. So I haven't done that in a while, and I'm more of a guy that I'd rather meet someone in person just so I see where they are. And I understand why women do it, safety issues and things like that. I definitely get it. But the problem is that people put up fake profiles, and I get this all the time on Instagram, and I'm there to promote the podcast.
Mhm.
I'm not there to meet anyone because the thing is, Joy, within a couple of texts, they're already calling you babe and honey and all that. So then I
See, that
know,
that's when you know that that's the wrong one. As my cousin
yeah.
said, "Be okay and move on."
Yeah, and then I remember one time somebody had text me a picture of she looked like Dua Lipa. I mean, beautiful woman. I'm like, oh boy, this woman's having trouble meeting men. Yeah, in my
Yeah.
mind. Anyway, I swear within a couple of minutes they were asking me for money, and I knew it was someone fake, Joy,
Wow.
because when you put a dollar symbol, you usually put it in front of the number. They
Mhm.
put it after the number, so then I knew it was someone that was fake. And I
Wow. Oh my goodness.
the spelling was terrible.
Yes.
When they ask me where they're from or where I'm from, I say I'm New York City. I don't say I'm from the New York City, USA. So when
Mhm.
they told me they were from so and so USA, then I knew. I'm
You
like,
knew.
I just knew. Yeah. So
And
anyway,
that's what that's what I mean in terms of really going through folks' profiles.
yeah,
And what I ended up doing was just taking nights. I would take a night, grab a glass of wine, and just read through profiles. If I started
mm.
seeing misspellings and started seeing things that didn't make sense, I said, okay, this one is okay to just say no to, keep moving.
Was it
And
swipe right? That's what they call it. That's no good, right? I don't know because I'm not on
I don't know.
Tinder.
I don't remember if right or left
Okay.
is the one that you want. But, just taking a moment to really read through to see who might have been a match for me, why the system was even saying that you were X% of a match, and
Right.
and just taking a look through profiles carefully, because safety, like you said, is always a big thing. But I found being able to do that helped because I wasn't in a place where I was going out. So,
Yeah.
it was easy to say, okay, oh no, I'll just find somebody and meet them the regular way. I wasn't going out. After my divorce, I was not going out the house. I wasn't going to any social events. So I wouldn't, and actually the therapist said, you're never going to meet anybody because you don't go anywhere. And so then over years, and it took years for me to even get to the point where I would say, okay, let me try this online thing. And through taking my time. At first, I was kind of rushing into it,
Yeah.
and then and again, doing that privately because didn't want to tell anybody that I was doing online dating because that was embarrassing at 50, I think I was 46 at the time.
Yeah.
And then later on in life, later on in that process, I had just given up because I met someone and we had been communicating, and then the narcissistic personality started coming out, and I said, I cannot do this again. So I gave up. And then for months, I didn't do anything. I then went back on maybe 6 or 7 months later at the encouragement of some of my employees. I was a
Yeah.
principal at the time, and my secretary was like, "You haven't been on a date. You need to try." So then I tried it again.
Mhm.
And my first date was with a gentleman who walked in and said, "There's no way that you are single, or unless something is wrong with you." And so I
That
was
was
like,
a part compliment and part taking a shot
yes,
at you, I guess.
yes. So he said that, turned around and walked away and was
Oh,
walking out the door. Then he
what?
came back and he started laughing. He said, He said, "I just knew you were gonna be a catfish." And he and I have been friends ever since, but that was my first in-person date via
Yeah.
an online, experience, and turns out he was a detective, and as he's talking to me, he said, "Who knows you're here? Who knows where you are?" And at the time, I hadn't told anybody that I was dating online and
Oh,
going to meet
wow.
anybody. We met in a public place, and so he went through all the things that I had done wrong in getting to that experience,
Wow.
and, just told me, at least 2 or 3 people should know where you are. Somebody needs to know the profile of the person that you went out with and how you communicated with them. They should have the phone number if you have the phone number. They should know where you're going and what time you're gonna be there. When you go home, don't go directly home. Go on a route other than directly home in case somebody decides to follow you. And so by the end
Wow.
of that conversation, I sat there and I went like, and he said, "Don't ever go out to dinner because then you'll be stuck at a table with somebody who you might not be interested in." He said, "That's why we did coffee." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, is this what people do nowadays?"
I've heard that about the coffee, and and I wanted to get back a little bit to the topic, because that's a great story. And having a detective as a friend, he can give you the rundown of what to look for, what not to look for, obviously.
Absolutely.
So, getting back to the topic at hand, right? Abandonment issues. Are you fine? Is it more again? People just don't want to be lonely. Getting back to it again, and pretty much repeating the question. Is it do they feel that they can't get someone else?
Yeah.
Um, uh, they don't want to be alone for a period of times, or they just figure they put up with a lot of bullshit from the opposite sex or their partner, and now what happens? Oh, I'm alone. I don't know what to do. Is that some of the things that you encounter with some of your friends, you, me, what?
Absolutely. It's all of that. When it comes back to the abandonment issues and being in toxic relationships, we're sometimes, and I'll speak for me, my experience was putting on a front, I always say wearing a mask. So if you
Mm,
saw us out in public, you thought that that was the perfect family. You have mother and father, and you have children. My kids were well behaved, very articulate, for their age. They were, were able to have conversations with adults and were able to do public speaking kind of events and things of that nature. And again, the mask that I was wearing was that all was well. You
mm,
go into, home or more of a private setting, and all was chaos, and lots of unhappiness. But because, again, I was afraid to be by myself now as a parent of 3 children,
yeah.
um, do you leave? Do you stay? How do how is this going to work? And then while you're in a relationship that's unhealthy, when folks are telling you that, nobody's going to want you, nobody's going to want you because you have 3 kids, and you're hearing that constantly, I began to believe it. And so who was I going to tell about that experience? I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my parents. My kids and I knew what was going on in our household.
Right.
And so, already dealing with whether or not I was worthy, whether or not I was lovable, it it beat me up. It beat me
Mm,
up. And it really got to the point with the arguments became to be too much. He was abusing drugs, and my daughters finally just said, "Mommy, you deserve better than this. Why are you dealing with this?" So when your kids tell you that, it's an eye opener. It's an eye opener.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes someone from the outside looking in
Yeah.
could see
Yep.
it, and when we can't. So, are there ways to prevent that type of issue? And like you said, maybe seeking counseling, or knowing that the problem exists. Any other suggestions you would make in your journey?
Yeah, I always talk about having a good friend group, that you can be honest with. Um, some people, and sometimes that's a challenge because when you share with your friends about your relationship, sometimes our friends can get very protective, and then they'll be mad at that particular spouse or significant other, and that can cause some drama dynamics in the relationship. But I found counseling and just finding just some other people who may not be directly connected in your relationship, but are in your
Right.
friend circle. So people that you can talk to about whatever's going on in your life. Um, Not people who are going to beat you up for making bad decisions or pressure you into
Yeah,
things,
you don't
but
need
some
those
folks,
people. Yeah.
Yeah, but just having some folks who might get you to rethink some things. Some folks who are in relationships that are healthy, that you want to know how they got to that level. Some folks that maybe you've seen struggle through parts of their relationship and now are in a better place. So I think finding people who've had those type of experiences who are willing to own up to it and have conversations with you is key, is important. And working on your own mental health. And sometimes, and I believe counseling is such. I always say counseling isn't for just for crazy people, because people automatically say, "Oh, well, you must be crazy if you go to counseling." No, I'm trying to figure out what some things in my life that have impacted my thinking, that have impacted my decision making. Why did I stay in a relationship for so long that I knew years ago was unhealthy? Why did I even continue? Why did I make some of those decisions? And counselors help you weave through some things in your past that either you're blocking out, you don't want to admit happened,
Yeah.
or that you just need to talk through with a sounding board who doesn't necessarily tell you what to do, but helps you come to some conclusions on why you think the way that you do and whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Gives you some readings to do. I think there's a lot that we can do, but vulnerability and being honest is key
Okay.
in the entire process.
No, I agree with that. First of all, Joy, I want to thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really appreciate it. And before I let you go, talk about your memoir. Was that a labor of love? It seemed like it was when you were young, a young girl to now. So talk more about that.
Yeah, I wrote my memoir again with my actually divorce lawyer and my counselor in mind, thinking of how I made it through a challenging relationship and what advice, because they kept saying, "How did you get to the point where you are?" And I said, I came in being honest up front. I told my therapist, I need help. I said, something about my thinking is off track and I need help in putting those pieces together. So we began to start looking at some of the things that I journaled about, um, so that he could get a better understanding of me. But over time, he said, you know what, you just need to keep writing. Just keep writing whatever's going
Mm.
through your mind. And when I started going back to all of my journals and notebooks from high school, I kept saying, "There's a book in here. There's a book in here." And so there were so many different topics. I had my experiences as an educator, my experiences as a mom, my experiences as an adoptee, my experiences just in life in middle school, high school, and things of that nature, and how that impacted, and then the relationship. And so what we did was I worked with a book coach and she read everything that I have ever written. So I took it
Wow.
from my journals, read it and spoke it into Google. It, did the typing for me. I did my edits and sent her over 1,000 files. She read it all. We put it into chapters, and from there, really established the framework for the book, which it has flashbacks from past to present. And then what happened in the midst of all that was my adoption journey and finding my birth mother and my birth father,
Yeah.
using DNA and using my original birth certificate when the laws changed in the state of New Jersey to access my original birth certificate. And so that then became a big part of me understanding me, helping me elaborate on those other chapters, but became a big part of this journey, incorporating what I've learned about myself, excuse me, and what I've learned in terms of my responsibility to being able to help others who were either adoptees or adopted parents and birth parents, and just folks going through unhealthy relationships. I wanted to put all those pieces together in my memoir, in hopes of helping somebody else. I felt kind of convicted to do that.
Yeah. And what's the name of the book?
Finding Joy, a true story of faith, family, and love. You can find it on Amazon. I have my website, findingjoy.us, and I'm on social media at Finding Joy Renee. And Joy is with an I.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely put it on the show notes. And
Yep,
anything
again,
else
the
you?
cover of the
Oh
book.
yeah, there it goes. Yeah, I'll definitely put it on the show notes. That's a
Ooh,
good book.
I
Yeah,
can't do
there you
this right.
go. There you go. Anything else you want to promote?
No, that's really where I am. I am always looking for, speaking engagements to share more of my story about being adopted and advocating for families and belonging. I think many of us are just trying to find where we fit And now that the media has changed in terms of programming, you see a lot more topics and TV shows about adoption,
Yeah.
interweaving the theme in their shows. And so I think my goal is for us to get to a place where we're normalizing that conversation, where people can feel comfortable, but also making people aware of the sensitivity that also comes with having those conversations.
No, sounds good. And give us that website one more time.
My website,
Yes.
Finding Joy, that's joy with an I.us.
All right, sounds good. Well, Joi, again, thank you so much for being on People on Thinking. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yep, my pleasure. Bye-bye.